For each of us, time travel is truly a utopia. Time machine, black hole, these concepts seem to only exist in works of science fiction. However, history has recorded many cases that make us really rethink this point of view. Here are 3 such cases. 1. RAF Field Marshal Victor Goddard travels to the future. RAF Field. Marshal Victor Goddard had a strange experience in 1935. While flying over an abandoned airfield near Edinburgh, Scotland, he found the hangar was overgrown with weeds and had a herd of cows was grazing there. At the same time, a storm hit, with strong winds pulling him back towards the airport. The storm quickly dissipated, and when he flew over that airfield again, the area looked brand new with planes painted in yellow, which was unusual, a type of monoplane belonging to the squadron. The Royal Air Force and the airport staff there are all dressed in blue, which is also unusual as the staff usually wear brown. All of this remained a mystery until 4 years later when the Air Force began painting the planes yellow, importing the models Mr. Goddard had seen, and the mechanics began to convert, dressed in blue. Did Mr. Goddard somehow fly to the future 4 years, then quickly return to his own time? 2. A Path to the Past. Another amazing case of time travel was described in Ken Mo's Time Traveler article in Strange Magazine Volume 2, Spring 1988 issue. The article describes a man. He called himself LC, first initials of his real name, experienced one of the most incredible events of his life, one he could never forget. Author Mo writes, LC and a business partner, Charlie, false name, had just finished lunch in the small town of Abbeville in southwestern Louisiana, USA. While walking and discussing business, they drove north along Highway 167 toward the city of Lafayette, 15 miles, 24 kilometers away. It was October 20th, 1969, and the time was around 1:30 p.m. It was a beautiful day in autumn. The sky was clear and the temperature was about 15 degrees Celsius. The road was quiet, fairly clear, until they saw ahead of what appeared to be an old, slow-moving turtle car. They approached this ancient relic. Although the car has a very old design from decades ago, it looks very new. This led LC and Charlie was amazed. Since the car was moving too slowly, the 2 men decided to pass it. When they did, Mr. LC saw a strange car with a very large yellow license plate marked 1,940 inches clearly. This is so unusual, even illegal. As they moved slowly to the left of the strange vehicle, Mr. LC discovered that the driver of the other car was a young woman wearing an antique 1940s outfit. This was 1969, so the sight of a young woman wearing a hat with a long, colorful fur, and the fur coat is really unusual. A child sat on a chair next to the woman, probably a little girl. The child was wearing a thick coat and a hat. This is confusing because the outside temperature is only slightly cold and a light sweater is warm enough, but the clothes of the woman and the baby are clothes for the cold winter. As the 2 men pulled up to the car, they realized the woman was scared and confused. They could see the woman looking back and forth in panic as if she was lost or in need of help. She looked like she was about to cry. Sitting on the passenger side, Mr. LC called her and asked if she needs help. She nodded to indicate yes, at the same time looking down at the 2 men's car. The 40s car had a slightly higher seat than the 1969 car, with a very confused expression. Mr. LC signaled for her to pull over to the side of the road. The girl pulled over, and the 2 men also overcame to pull over to the curb in front of the strange car. When the 2 men's car came to a complete stop on the side of the road, they turned to see the strange car behind them. But to my surprise, the woman's strange car was nowhere to be seen. Remember, this is on an empty highway with no turns, and nowhere to hide a car. That strange car has really disappeared without a trace. Mr. LC and Charlie turned to look at the empty highway. They sat in the car, aghast and dazed. They know that even searching is futile. At the same time, the driver of the car right behind the strange antique car also pulled over to the side of the road. That person ran to Mr. LC and Charlie and insisted that they explain what happened to that strange antique car. As it turned out, he was driving north on Highway 167 when he suddenly saw in the distance a new car slowly passing in front of a very old car, so slow that they looked close, like it stopped. He saw the new car pull over to the side of the road, and the old car started doing the same thing. For a moment, it obscured the new car and then suddenly disappeared. The three men discussed enthusiastically about the strange thing that had just happened in front of their eyes. They then walked around the area for an hour. The third man insisted on reporting the incident to the police. He considers this to be a missing situation and that they are witnesses. Mr. Elsie and Charlie refused to do so because they did not know where the woman and the child and the car had gone. They went missing, but no one found them. The third man finally understood that without the cooperation of Mr. Elsie and Charlie, you cannot report this incident to the police alone because no one will believe your word. He exchanged addresses and phone numbers with Mr. Elsie and Charlie. For many years he kept in touch with them and called them just to talk about the incident at the time and to confirm once again what he had seen was real. 3. They saw an airstrike in the future. Next comes the third strange time travel case. This case is mentioned in the book The Little Giant Book of Eerie Thrills and Unspeakable Chills by Ron Edwards, C.B. Colby, and John Macklin. According to the authors, in 1932, newspaper reporter J. Bernard Hutton and photographer Joachim Brandt were assigned to write an article about the shipyard in Hamburg, Germany. They drove to the vast complex, interviewed a number of foremen and workers, and completed an article late in the afternoon. As they left, the two heard the sound of a plane engine, then looked up and saw the sky filled with fighter planes. They then heard anti-aircraft weapons firing in the city as bombs began to explode around them. Seconds later, the area turned into a raging pan of fire when the gas tanks were hit. The warehouses quickly collapsed under the heavy bombardment, and the cranes were twisted into scrap piles. Mr. Hutton and Brandt realized that this was more than just an exercise. They rushed to the car when the anti-aircraft gunners successfully shot down the bombers flying overhead. As he ran to the gate, Mr. Hutton asked a guard if there was anything they could do to help, but was told to leave the area immediately. As they drove to the city of Hamburg, Mr. Hutton and Brandt looked quite confused. Before, the sky had turned black when the attack broke out, but now it was clear blue, and the city looked peaceful. The streets were busy, and the buildings were undamaged. No one seemed to be acting strangely while going about their daily routine. Mr. Hutton and Brandt stopped the car and turned to look at the dock. Now they received another shock when they could not see the sky-high plumes of black smoke, bumpy bomb craters, and damaged buildings. What is happening? Back in the editorial office, they washed the photos and had another surprise. At the time of the strike, Mr. Brandt was still taking pictures, but his photographs showed nothing out of the ordinary. The shipyard looked as it did when they first arrived that morning. There was no evidence that a rain of enemy plane bombs had devastated the area, as they had seen before. The editors looked at the photographs and wondered why the two men insisted that they were involved in an airstrike. He dismissed their story, saying that on their way back to the office they might have stopped in a pub for a few drinks. Just before World War II began, Mr. Bernard Hutton moved to London, England. In 1943, he saw a newspaper article describing a successful RAF air raid at the Hamburg shipyard. He felt a chill down his spine as he examined the photographs. The scene of the devastation looked exactly the same as during his visit to Mr. Brandt in the spring of 1932. There is only one difference. Mr. Hutton and Brandt witnessed the event 11 years before it happened. Thank you for joining us today. Remember, the universe is full of secrets waiting to be discovered. Until next time, keep your eyes wide open, your mind curious and open to the wonders that lie both within and beyond our understanding. Goodbye.